Assalamu alaikum everyone. Sorry to keep you waiting. So welcome to the Black Hole. I am Shariar Khan and today we are going to discuss the relation between mythology and astronomy, which is an interesting kind of a juxtaposition because mythology deals with things of the very, very distant past, whereas astronomy is kind of the latest science and explores the farthest reaches of the universe. But as far as naming conventions are concerned, they have a very deep connection. And if you have heard various astronomical and space related terminology, you will have heard of various kinds of names from ancient Greek and Roman mythology, which might sound weird to you that why we are still using those names. But even though astronomy is a very very modern science, it's also one of the oldest sciences. So it's modern in the sense that we are using very very modern technology to make advances in astronomy. But the first instrument that we used to explore the subject of astronomy was our own eye, which humans have had ever since humans have lived. So whenever humans look up into the night sky, and in both for most of our history, skies weren't as polluted as they are now, except in very exceptional circumstances. And when the ancients looked up, they saw all sorts of stars and patterns in the night sky, and they wanted to make sense of those patterns somehow. So they connected stars and the points that they saw into various kinds of shapes and related them to their own mythologies and stories. So every different culture across the globe, they had their own mythologies, their own stories that they related with the movement of the stars. But the most of the names that we inherit now in modern astronomy come from Greek and Roman sources, and some from Islamic astronomy as well. And a little bit only from other cultures like the Aboriginal cultures and Norse cultures. We'll discuss a little bit of that as well. So the goal of this talk is to uh, give you an appreciation for the mythological roots in modern astronomy. Everything is not just number crunching in astronomy. There is a we even though we want to make our research as objective as possible, we are not computers. We are humans at the end of the day, and we want to bring the things we are exploring down to earth a little bit, and we do that by naming things from ancient mythologies and stories to make them more relatable. Whereas the ancients took those stories literally, we don't take them literally anymore, but we still tend to use those names just as a continuation of that tradition. So I will now start the slideshow. ठीक है, is this visible? Okay. So this is the outline of what I will discuss. So first of all, I will discuss the myths behind some of the constellations, and a colleague of ours, Alam, made this by the way. ये जरा ना इधर ले आओगे, इसको ना उठा के ना ये चेयर इसके साथ ऐसे वो खड़ा कर दो, और ये पत्ता हटा देना, इसमें से पत्ता ही हटा दो. There are some you can see some constellations over here as well. I will discuss these. क्या हुआ? अच्छा लगा बस मैं, चलो चलें खैर. So I will show you some pictures of this as well, and you can take a look at that more closely after the lecture. So as you know, there are many constellations in the night sky. In total, the currently accepted list is about 88 constellations. The Greeks only named 48 because they were only exposed to the northern hemisphere. They weren't able to see the night sky of the southern hemisphere because they didn't travel that far south. But after the globe was circumnavigated and we saw the southern part of the globe as well, and we looked up at the night sky, we prefer not to give them random names which have like no connection to human culture. We want to make them a little relatable, so that's why we give them the names of ancient Greek gods and goddesses and monsters and so on, just to make them more relatable. But the ancients actually took those names literally, but we don't. So I will discuss the myths behind some of the constellations, why they were named that way. Not all, because 88 is a long list, and not all of them have mythological roots. Only like little bit more than half of them. After that, I will discuss a little bit about astrology. So a lot of people, especially in our country, they take astrology very seriously, and a lot of people and they still take it literally, as the ancients did. So I want to debunk that notion. I want to take the opportunity to debunk that notion that astrology is not a science, it is a pseudoscience, and why. After that, I will tell you the mythological origin of the names of the planets and the moons in the solar system. So every planet in the solar system, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, all of these are names of various gods and goddesses. So I will tell you a little bit about them as well. This is something I find really fascinating. And after that, I will tell you some ways in which we are using these ancient mythological names in modern naming conventions, such as NASA space missions. They're still using the names of Greek gods and goddesses. Even European Space Agency. China is naming their space probes after their own gods and goddesses from ancient Chinese mythology. And the same with India. So I will give you examples of those as well. And finally, I will also tell you how the names of the days of the week have arisen. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. All of these are also named after gods actually. And also I will tell you about how the months were named. January, February, March. Some of them are named after gods. 2 of them are named after emperors. And some of them are just numerical. So I will tell you about that as well. So let's start with the constellations. So there is a very interesting legend in Greek history, which is the legend of Perseus. Have you guys seen that movie, the Clash of the Titans and Wrath of the Titans? Very famous Hollywood movie. So in that is depicted the legend of Perseus, who was the son of Zeus, and while his mother was not a god, his mother was human, named Danae, who was the daughter of a king. So Perseus did a lot of like heroic stuff during his life. So first of all, one of the things he did was he beheaded the monster called Medusa. So who was basically a gorgon, and a gorgon in Greek mythology is a monster which has snakes growing out of its scalp, and it has a death stare that if you stare into the eyes of a gorgon, you will be turned into stone. And and she also tends to have very sharp nails and very sharp teeth. So very dangerous creature. So Perseus was sent by a king to behead Medusa and bring back her head. So the king actually wanted to get rid of Perseus. That's why he gave Perseus that mission. But Perseus was able to overcome it because in such a way that before attempting his mission, he actually asked for the help of Zeus. And Zeus gave him some special weapons. And also Hera also gave her some special weapons to aid him in his mission. And using those weapons, so one of them was, and Hermes, the god as well, also assisted him. So Hermes gave Perseus a special sword with which to behead Medusa. And another goddess gave him a special kind of polished shield through which he could see the reflection of Medusa and not stare at her directly, and using the reflection pinpoint her location and behead her. And that's what Perseus did. So after beheading the monster Medusa, her blood flowed out and spilled onto the ground, and from her blood emerged the winged horse we call Pegasus, which is a very famous character in Greek mythology. So Pegasus was actually the child of Medusa and Poseidon, who was hiding inside Medusa, and only after Medusa was killed was Pegasus able to escape. Now, after succeeding in this dangerous mission, when Perseus returned to the city, he found yet another uh, circumstance, and that was that a huge sea monster by the name of Cetus was ravaging the city. So Cetus had actually been sent to the city by the god Poseidon, because why did Poseidon was actually the sea god, he was the brother of Zeus. So why did Poseidon send this huge monster to ravage the city? That was because the queen of the city, Cassiopeia, she had a daughter Andromeda, and Cassiopeia was very vain about her beauty and the beauty of her daughter. So she said that herself and Andromeda were more beautiful than the Nereids, who were sea nymphs, very closely related to Poseidon. So Poseidon got very angry when this mere human said that she and her daughter were more beautiful than the sea nymphs. And to take revenge, he sent his monster Cetus to destroy their entire city. But he gave them one condition. Poseidon said that you can save your city from being destroyed if you offer your daughter Andromeda to the monster as sacrifice. So the king finally relented, and he had his daughter chained to the rocks, and Cetus was about to eat Andromeda, when in the nick of time Perseus arrived, and Perseus used the same head of Medusa that he had just slain, that he had just beheaded, and he pointed it towards the monster, her eyes, and the monster turned to stone, and the monster was defeated that way. So on the same day almost, he had two stellar victories. So this is the story. So how are some of the constellations related to this? So as you can see here on the right side, there are 6 constellations which feature characters from the story that I just told you, and these are part of the night sky. So the Greeks, to commemorate this story, they named six of the characters from this very famous story as constellations in the night sky. So one of the constellations is Perseus. Another constellation that you will see is Pegasus. Andromeda is also a constellation. Cassiopeia is a very familiar constellation, W-shaped. Cetus is right beside it, and Cepheus is actually the name of the king, the father of Andromeda. So these names are not random. These are all characters from a very famous story in Greek mythology. So on the left, you can see a statue of Perseus, famous statue of Perseus, holding the head of the Gorgon, and he has his eyes closed not to stare at it, because even after being killed, Medusa can still turn you into stone if you look into her eyes. And on the right, there is a clay pot on which is depicted, in the middle is Perseus, and he is trying to save Andromeda on the right from the monster Cetus on the left. And this is a famous painting from the Renaissance period of the same situation. Okay, so these are some of the constellations named after this legend. Let me try to show you a map of this also. A minute. So this is a free app that you can install on your phone, and you can also use it on the web browser. It is called Stellarium. And on this, you can look at all of the constellations as well as all of the objects in the night sky. You can locate anything, any of the planets if you want to see them. So here you can see all of these constellations. So here is Andromeda. Right beside it, beside the constellation, is Perseus. Here is the monster Cetus that I just told you about. And here is the king Cepheus. And here is Pegasus the horse. This is Pegasus. and others as well. I will tell you about some of the others as well. So you can find all of these on a constellations map. You can use this app Stellarium. Now let's move on to another very famous hero of Greek mythology, which you may have heard of, whom you may have heard of, Hercules. Very, very famous, the strongest and bravest warrior of Greek mythology. Actually, his name was actually in Greek mythology, his name was Heracles, not Hercules. The Romans named him Hercules afterwards. And Heracles actually derives from the name of the goddess Hera. And Heracles, in literally, it means the pride of Hera. So, who was this hero Heracles or Hercules? So he was also a demigod, just like Perseus. His father was Zeus, but his mother was a human named Alcmene. He was also actually related to Perseus genetically. So Perseus was actually his great grandfather. So he was both Perseus's great grandson and also his half brother, because their father was the same, Zeus. Kind of complicated. So very interesting stories connected to Hercules. So Hercules was always extremely strong when he was born. So it so happened that, so let me tell you a bit of a backstory. So so Hera was actually a goddess who was the wife of Zeus, one of the wives of Zeus. She was the main wife of Zeus actually. But Zeus actually, he was very promiscuous, and he had lots and lots of other lovers as well, with whom he had many, many children. So Hera was always very, very jealous of these promiscuous activities of Zeus. And to take revenge on Zeus's promiscuous activities, she used to lay traps and try to kill all of his like half offsprings that he had with other like humans or goddesses besides Hera. So she similarly had a vengeance. She had wanted to take vengeance on the little Hercules as well. And ever since poor little Hercules was born, Hera was constantly trying to kill him. So even when Hercules was just born, Hera sent 2 snakes into his cot in which he was sleeping, and beside him was sleeping his twin brother as well, Hercules, his twin brother as well, who was not a demigod, he was actually human. So his twin brother got very, very scared when the snakes arrived, but when Hercules saw the snakes, he just like grabbed him with both of his hands and easily crushed them and started playing with them like toys. That's the first famous story of Hercules. So this is a statue depicting this mythological event. So afterwards, since Hera was constantly trying to kill Hercules, Hercules' mother Alcmene, she tried to hide Hercules from Hera's wrath. And once she hid him inside the forest, from where another goddess, Demeter, retrieved him. And since she didn't know how much Hera hated this baby Hercules, she just thought it was a random baby. She took him to Hera herself. But Hera did not recognize Hercules instantly. And she had a little bit of pity for the lost little boy, and she started breastfeeding him because he was all alone. But since this is Hercules we are talking about, Hercules bit her so hard, and she pulled him away from herself. And as she was pulling him away while breastfeeding, some of her milk like sprayed into the heavens. And that is the story of how the Milky Way formed according to the Greeks. That it is a spilled milk from Hera after Hercules bit her. So very, very interesting. So that is the story of the Milky Way according to the Greeks. That is how the Greeks explained the Milky Way, this whole like streak of kind of like milk strewn across the sky. Where did it come from? And they explained it like this. And they have all sorts of explanations of all the other phenomena that we observe as well, including the seasons. So the explanation for the seasons according to the Greeks is that there is a goddess of the spring called Persephone, and Hades is the god of the underworld, and Hades takes a liking to Persephone because Persephone is extremely beautiful, and Hades tries to capture her and takes her to his underworld. But as soon as he kidnaps her to the underworld, since she is the goddess of the spring, spring is over on earth, and immediately a dry season and a dry spell arrives on earth, and everything nothing blossoms anymore, and the crops start to fail, and everything like goes awry. So then Persephone's mother implores Hades to please give her back to the world so that there is like no more of these events. So Hades strikes a deal with Persephone's mother to return her for only 6 months of the year, during which the Greeks have believed that spring occurs, and during the other months are the months of autumn and winter when Persephone is in the underworld. So for 6 months she resurfaces on the earth, and that's when spring and summer arrive, and when Hades takes her back to the underworld, that's when we have autumn and winter. So currently we are in winter, so that means Persephone is probably in the underworld. So besides this, the most famous stories associated with Hercules are his 12 labors or his 12 struggles. So Hercules had an extremely tough life because Hera was always against him, and she was always putting him in extremely difficult situations. So he ended up at a king's doorstep, and the king ordered him to complete these 12 extremely dangerous tasks. So the first of these was to slay the Nemean lion. This is a painting, an artwork depicting all of the 12 labors. So the first labor, and you can see the first labor in the bottom left over here. So the first labor of that Hercules was supposed to complete was to kill a huge lion who was roaming around near the city of Nemea, and hence it was called the Nemean lion. And this was a huge lion whose hide was made of bronze, and which no arrow could penetrate. So first of all, when Hercules arrived at the scene, he tried to shoot arrows at the lion, but no arrow was able to penetrate its skin. Its skin was so hard, made of almost bronze. So afterwards, he chased the lion into its cave, hit it on the head with his club multiple times, which stunned the lion, and then he strangled him with his bare arms. And after killing the lion, he tried to cut its skin to take it back to the king, but since its skin was made of bronze, he wasn't able to cut it, so he used the claws of the lion itself to cut its own skin, because that was the only thing that would cut its skin. So Hercules was not only smart, he was not only strong, he was also shown to be very, very smart and resourceful in all of his labors. He had brains as well as bronze. So that's the first labor, and I will tell you how some of these are related to the constellations. Next is another labor of his, the second one, the Lernaean Hydra. So after this, he was sent by the king to defeat this 9-headed lizard over here. But as soon as Hercules clubbed one of the heads, 2 more emerged in its place. So then he was confused, how will I defeat this monster that even if I cut off its head or destroy one of its heads, 2 more emerge. So then he realized that immediately after I cut one of its heads, if I cauterize that wound using fire, then new heads will not emerge from that wound. So that's how he figured out how to defeat the Hydra. So enlisting the help of one of his nephews on the right, and on the left is Hercules. So Hercules clubbed one of the heads, and his nephew immediately applied fire to the open wound, after which that neck was permanently closed. So that's how he defeated that beast. And there are some others as well. Let's go to, because it will take a lot of time to explain all of these, let's go to number 7. And all of these don't have constellations named after them, only some of them. Let's go to number 7, which is the Cretan bull. So it so happened that, so there are many interesting stories in Greek mythology. All kinds of stories you will find in Greek mythology. So once upon a time there was a king, and he asked the god Poseidon to give him a very, very beautiful animal for sacrifice. So the Poseidon obliged, and Poseidon sent him an extremely beautiful and large-sized bull. But after he saw that bull, he was so mesmerized by its beauty that he didn't want to sacrifice it. He wanted to keep it for himself, and he instead sacrificed some other animal. That angered Poseidon, and Poseidon ordered the bull to start destroying that king's city. So the bulls went on a rampage and started destroying and stomping everything. So Hercules was sent to this city to control this bull, and he went over there, and it was like a piece of cake for Hercules, who could strangle a lion with his bare hands. He just carried the bull on his shoulders and took it straight to the king, and then said, "Here it is." So that's how he like solved that problem. So the first labor that I told you about, how he slayed the lion. So from here comes the constellation of Leo, and also the star sign that we call Leo. All of the 12 zodiac signs that we have, Leo, Virgo, Libra, etc., all of these are characters in all of these mythologies. So the star sign of Leo, that is a constellation in the night sky, and that comes from this first labor of Hercules, that he defeated this lion. Second is the Hydra. Hydra is another constellation in the night sky. That comes from the second labor. The constellation of Taurus, which is also one of the zodiac signs, that comes from the Cretan bull. So that is its origin story. After this, then, so you can see on the right the constellations that are related to the story of Hercules. So the constellation Hercules itself are named after the hero. The constellation of Leo, the lion, the Hydra, the Taurus. And now another thing, how does Cancer, the crab, come into this story? So it turns out that when Hercules was trying to kill the Hydra with the help of his nephew, so Hera tried to intervene in that process and try to stop Hercules from killing the Hydra. So she sent a giant crab his way to try to stop him and try to bite him or something. But crab is nothing for a guy like Hercules. He just stomped on it, and in one little stomp, he crushed the poor thing, and the crab died instantly. So to commemorate that heroic crab, we have the constellation Cancer, who tried to who only managed to annoy Hercules a little bit. Okay. Then let's move on to the 11th labor, from which we have 3 different constellations. So the 11th labor, in what happened in the 11th labor, so Hercules was tasked to bring these special apples from a special tree, which was guarded by 3 goddesses called the Hesperides. So the apples themselves are not that important, but as he was trying to find those apples, because they were located in a very secret location, he didn't know where they were exactly. So as he was climbing a mountain or something, trying to locate those apples, he came across the god Prometheus. I don't think he was actually a god. He was, I think, a monster or a giant or something. So Prometheus is famous in Greek mythology because he stole fire from the gods and he gave it to humans. So that's how Greeks explained how humans got fire. So since Prometheus stole something from the gods and gave it to the humans, Zeus punished him. And he punished him in such a way that he chained Prometheus to a high mountain, and he condemned him to have his liver eaten every day by an eagle. So an eagle flew in every day and ate out Prometheus's liver, and then went away, and his liver regrew, and the next day the same thing happened. So that was his punishment for stealing something from the gods. So as Hercules was ascending the mountain trying to find the apples of Hesperides, he came across poor Prometheus chained to the rocks and having his liver eaten constantly. So he took pity on poor Prometheus, and he first of all, when the eagle flew in, he killed that eagle with his arrow, Hercules. And after that, he freed Prometheus from his pain. So there are two constellations, the last two written in this list on the right. Aquila, so that is the eagle that was eating the liver of Prometheus every day. After Hercules killed that eagle was transferred into the heavens by the gods as a constellation for memory. And that arrow that Hercules used to kill the eagle, that is also commemorated as the constellation Sagitta. And also another monster who was guarding the apples of Hesperides, there was a 100-headed dragon. So that is after Hercules killed that dragon, that was then transferred into the heavens as the constellation Draco by the gods. So the myth of Hercules, that actually contributed the most constellations, about 8. So okay, let's see some of these, try to find these. So here is the constellation of Hercules. Here is Draco, the dragon, the 100-headed dragon. Here is Aquila, the eagle. And here is Taurus, the Cretan bull that Hercules controlled, and others as well. So I will tell you about some other constellations as well that you will find interesting. Okay. So these were, and this is an image showing Hercules on the left and killing the eagle who was coming in to eat the liver of Prometheus. And this is a painting showing the origin of the Milky Way according to Greek mythology. So that is Hera, and the little baby here is Hercules. Okay. Now there is another famous legend, not as famous as the previous two, but still quite famous, of Jason and the Argonauts. So who was Jason? So in the kingdom of Iolcos, there was a king named King Aeson, who was overthrown by his half-brother Peleus for the throne. So after he was overthrown and his half-brother took over the throne, King Aeson tried to protect his infant son, obviously, because we know that whenever a brother overthrows his brother for the throne, he tends to kill the brother as well as all of his offspring, just so there is no competition afterwards. So Aeson tried to protect his infant son Jason, and to protect him, he sent him away to live with a wise centaur who was called Chiron or something. So centaurs are also very interesting creatures in Greek mythology. They are half human and half horse. So there is a constellation called Centaurus as well in the night sky, which is named after the centaurs in Greek mythology. So the most famous centaur is this fellow Chiron, who was the godfather of Jason. So when Jason became an adult, he came back to his kingdom and he implored Peleus to give him back the throne because he was the rightful heir to the throne. So Peleus agreed. Peleus said that, okay, you can have the throne, but I have one condition. Can you bring me the golden fleece? So the golden fleece is a very, very important object in Greek mythology. So there was a very important golden ram, which had a very valuable fleece, which was called the golden fleece. And whoever could capture that fleece, he could have lots and lots of powers. So Jason agreed, and Jason said, okay, I'll go and try to find the golden fleece. So to find the golden fleece, he had a very special ship made, which was called the Argo. That ship was called the Argo. And he collected a whole bunch of heroes to aid him in his quest to find the golden fleece. And all of these people who were sailing on the Argo to find the golden, they were called the Argonauts. And including one of the Argonauts was actually Hercules himself. And two other Argonauts were these fellows, Castor and Pollux, who also have very interesting stories. So actually the constellation of Gemini, which are associated with twins. So actually they are named after these two twins, Castor and Pollux. Let me show you the picture. So here is the constellation Gemini, and you can easily distinguish, you can easily like decipher that there are two human shaped figures over stick figures, and the stars located on their heads, they are named after these two characters, the twins in Jason's story, Pollux and Castor, who aided Jason in his search for the golden fleece. And this entire thing, these two people, these twins, this is collectively called Gemini. Okay, so this is a picture showing these Argonauts sailing on their Argo and bringing back the golden fleece successfully. Okay. And this is another image showing Jason on the left holding the golden fleece and bringing it to King Peleus. And these are statues of the twins Castor and Pollux. So Pollux and Castor were twin brothers, yes, but they had different fathers. So Pollux was actually Zeus's son, and Castor was actually the son of this king, Tyndareus. But they were both born at the same time. So Zeus was extremely promiscuous, and Zeus, he fell for lots and lots of women, beautiful women. So when he saw Leda, he fell for her as well, and he came to her and seduced her in the form of a swan. So a swan in Greek is called Cygnus. The name is called Cygnus. Cygnus is another constellation. Okay, so he seduced her, and on the same day, Zeus's son and Tyndareus' sons were born. Even though they were born as twins, they had different fathers. So Pollux was immortal because he was the son of Zeus, whereas Castor was not. So Castor died early. And later on, Zeus had another child with Leda, the mother of Pollux and Castor, Helen of Troy. Helen of Troy is also a very important character in Greek mythology. She was the one over whom the whole Trojan War started. So what are the constellations named after this story that I just told you? So Aries. So Aries is the golden ram that I was telling you about. Its actual name was Chrysomelos, the golden ram, and its golden fleece was everyone's desire. So Aries, the ram, comes from this. It was the golden ram. Gemini, the constellation, it comes from these twins. And these twins are also referred to as the Dioscuri. So Dios means God, and Curai means children, basically. So the children of the god Zeus, Dioscuri means that basically. The constellation of Sagittarius, Centaurus is a different one. Centaurus, I guess, is it was selected to commemorate centaurs generally. But the constellation Sagittarius, if you look at it, it is also shaped like a centaur. So that was named after the centaur Chiron, who was the tutor of the godfather of Jason. There are three more constellations. So Carina, Puppis, and Vela. So these three are just parts of the ship Argo. These three are also constellations. And Cygnus, finally, that is Zeus in his swan form. So Zeus tended to change his form a lot to seduce different women, or not just to seduce women, but to accomplish various tasks. So he could change into any kind of form. Now, finally, let's come to the legend of Orion the Hunter. So the Orion constellation is a very, very familiar constellation in the night sky, and I have conducted many sessions here in which we have seen the Orion constellation, the Orion belt, and all of its various stars, and we have also peered into the Orion belt and saw the Orion Nebula with our telescope. Orion Nebula has nothing to do with what I'm telling you right now, but the Orion constellation, that is named after Orion the Hunter in Greek mythology. So who was Orion the Hunter? So Orion was a human. He was not a god, but he was a considered to be the best hunter in Greek mythology at the time. So he was such a master hunter that the goddess of hunting herself, Artemis, even though she didn't like to associate that much with men, she went with Orion on hunting trips because Orion was that good. So once upon a time, when Orion was hunting with Artemis somewhere in Crete, and Artemis's mother was also there, he boasted that he could kill any living creature on earth. So he got overconfident and he like blurted out that I could kill any creature on earth. But we always have to remember that the gods are always listening to us. So the gods are everywhere. There are gods in trees, and the air has a god, and the sun is a god in Greek mythology. Everywhere there are gods in Greek mythology. So if you go into the mind of an ancient Greek, for him there are gods spread everywhere, and you can't just you have to keep things to yourself if you don't want to enrage the god somehow. So Orion blurted out that I could kill any creature on earth, any living creature. That angered Gaia, the Mother Earth goddess. The goddess, the mother of all living creatures. She is like one of the most primary gods. When she heard that Orion said that he could kill any living creature, she got angry, obviously. So to like kill Orion, she sent a giant scorpion, and that giant scorpion managed to kill Orion. So after that, when all of this incident occurred, Orion was transferred to the heavens as a constellation, as well as the constellation Scorpius, which is also one of the zodiac signs. So the Scorpius constellation, the Scorpius zodiac sign, that comes from this scorpion who was sent to kill Orion by Gaia. Just alongside Orion in the map, you will also see, and you will see this shortly, you will also see three other constellations, which are Canis Major. So Canis Major was a dog who used to help Orion in his hunting adventures, and two other animals, the fox and the hare, and these were just placed there by the gods to spite Orion, because constellations are always fixed, and they place these two animals just within reach of Orion that he will never be able to hunt, just to spite him, that these two you will always keep chasing. As the sky revolves around us, you will always keep chasing those animals, but you will never be able to catch them, even though you said you were the greatest hunter on earth and you could kill any living creature. So that's what the gods did. So let's try to locate Orion in here. So here is Orion. On its left, you can see Canis Major, and the brightest star in Canis Major is Sirius, actually. This is Lepus, the rabbit that Orion is supposed to hunt. And there must be Canis Minor somewhere over here as well. I guess this. Yes, this one. This is Canis Minor. So Orion, Canis Major, Lepus, Canis Minor, and Scorpius as well. These five are part of the same story. Scorpius is placed, I think, somewhere a little bit far from these four. Yes, Scorpius is over here. So this was a giant scorpion sent by Gaia to kill Orion. Okay. So this is all that I will say about constellations and the stories behind them, but you should also explore a little bit on your own. What are the stories behind all of the other constellations? By the way, not all constellations are related to Greek mythology, because many constellations, as you may remember, that only 48 were named by the Greeks, but later on we found 40 more in the southern hemisphere. So some of them were named later after scientific instruments as well, and using other names from other mythologies as well. But it's always interesting to see where all of these names came from. This is Orion the Hunter, drawn on a star map. So these are all of the stars in the Orion constellation. So we have the Orion belt, which has 3 stars, and we have Betelgeuse on the left arm, and we have Bellatrix and Ceph and Rigel. So interestingly, I will not go a lot into the. I don't have a lot of time. I will just tell you that. So the names of the constellations are groups of stars. So the names of the constellations, most of them are from Greek mythology. But when you go into the individual stars in most of these constellations, a lot of them actually have names that come from Islamic astronomy. So even though the Islamic astronomers, they could not rename the constellations because they were standard by the time, but they had made lots and lots of further advances in astronomy, and they had pinpointed individual stars that the Greeks hadn't. So they had the opportunity to name them after their own, with their own Arabic terminology. So Rigel, actually the one on the right foot of this Orion, so Rigel actually comes from the Arabic word rijal, which means foot. That is a corruption of the word rijal, the Arabic word rijal. And Betelgeuse, that comes from the Arabic phrase Yad al-Jawza. So that means hand of the great one. And that was also little corrupted over time and became Betelgeuse, Yad al-Jawza. And Ceph is actually the same name that we use in our culture as well, Ceph, which means sword. We have names like Saifullah, so sword of Allah. So that is the same name over here, Ceph, PH here. So if you look at the names of individual stars, you will see a lot of names coming from Islamic culture, which is interesting. Now I will try to discuss astrology. So even though astronomy is a very, very important science, and we have made great strides in astronomy, and we have to realize and learn about the connection with the past, and we should know a little bit about mythology. We shouldn't take the mythological aspect literally, because then we will dive into pseudoscience instead of science. But people still believe that the way the constellations are moving and which constellations are in the night sky when a child is born, they somehow affect his personality, his or her personality. We can't blame the Greeks for believing this, because for the Greeks, the night sky was a constant light show on which these ancient myths played out every night. And it's natural for them to think that the entire sky is connected with us somehow, because humans throughout history until the modern era, they used to believe that the earth was the center of the universe, and the earth is the most important place in the entire universe, and everything is revolving around us. And literally that appears to be the case, because everything is revolving around us from our perspective. It's only when science advanced and we went into space that we realized that not everything is revolving around us. But people still take this thing seriously. But why should we not take this seriously anymore? So first of all, lots and lots of research has been done on astrology, and it has been found that there are no testable predictions of astrology. Moreover, even though astrologers claim that they have great insight into human personality and they can predict lots of things, when they have been examined closely and carefully using double-blind studies, which are the gold standard in research in psychology, it has been found that their predictions are no better than pure chance. And this has been found repeatedly, which has convinced people who believe in rationality that astrology is a pseudoscience. Moreover, there is no known physical mechanism which could come from the stars and influence someone's personality over here. If you talk about gravity, for example, okay, gravity is a universal force and gravity can propagate to infinite distances. That is true. But if you calculate the strength of gravity coming from the planets when a child is born, the gravity of the physician who is delivering the baby, his gravity is much stronger compared to the gravity coming from Jupiter or Mars. So and even the gravity of the surrounding objects when a baby is born, the machines and the walls of the room, for example, and the bodies of the nurses. So how come only Mars and Jupiter can influence it gravitationally, but not everything else? So if you want to talk about the gravitational influences of the surrounding objects at the moment of a child's birth, you should take into consideration all of the objects the lights and the cars passing by and everything, if you want to go into that level of detail, so it doesn't make sense. It's only like mythology. A very strong argument to disprove astrology that you can use is that the earth actually precesses like a top, like this. Even though it's spinning like this, the axis also revolves with a period of about 26,000 years. So it turns out that when the Greeks came up with their constellations, at that time, the north pole of the earth was pointing in a certain direction. But since the earth is constantly precessing, now 2000 years later, it is pointing in a very different direction, due to which all of the constellations have shifted one step back. So actually, when I look at charts made by astrologers, I am supposed to be a Virgo. But if you want to take astrology seriously, and you want to assign me a star sign based on the horoscope, based on the zodiac that was directly above me at the moment of my birth in 1996, then the constellation that was actually above me at that time was Leo, not Virgo, because everything has shifted now. So I'm supposed to be a Leo, but I always believed I was a Virgo. And I had read everything about being Virgos, and I had accepted the fact that I was a Virgo. Now I'm supposed to be a Leo. That means everything was a creation of my own mind. It has nothing to do with reality. So you can also change you have permission to change your star signs now. So whatever star sign is immediately before the one you think you have, that is your actual star sign. Okay. Now I've changed your personality instantly. So you shouldn't believe astrology, please. Moreover, they have done studies on twins. So all of the star alignments and planetary alignments, everything is the same for twins, obviously. But do twins have the exact same life trajectories? Do they have the exact same personality? Do they end up at the exact same place 10, 15, 20 years later? Obviously, no. The stars have not much effect. And also, the Greeks did not know about the other planets in the solar system beyond Saturn. They did not know about Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, asteroids, everything, all of these. So if Mars is supposed to have an influence on me, why not Uranus and Neptune and Pluto? Why not them? Include them as well. But they can't. So it's a complete hoax. That people still have TV shows running and newspaper columns running, making bucks selling these lies. It's amazing. Now let's move on to the. Now I want to discuss how the planets were named and some of the moons were named. So all of these names are actually come from gods. Mercury. So Mercury comes from the Roman messenger god Hermes. So in Greek it was called Hermes, and for the Romans it was called Mercury. And why was it? So I explained this in a previous session as well, which I had for the stargazing session, that even though the Greeks did not know the exact properties of these planets, somehow they were able to associate gods to those planets, which actually naturally fit to their descriptions, coincidentally only. So, for example, Mercury, the god, the Hermes, the god, he is supposed to be the fastest god because he has those winged slippers. He is also the messenger god who takes messages. He is like the WhatsApp of the gods. He takes messages to and from various gods and conveys messages. And to do this in a short amount of time, he is very, very fast. And Zeus made him these special slippers on which he flies very, very fast. So Mercury is the closest planet, and the closest planet always revolves the fastest. So this name actually fits with the planet Mercury. The second is Venus. This one actually doesn't fit at all, as I explained in my previous session as well. So when you look at Venus, and you can see Venus right now in the night sky as well, it's right above us right now, and it is the brightest object in the night sky. It has always appeared so. And since it appears always to be the brightest object in the night sky, people associated Venus with beauty. It was the most sparkling and brightest object. But in modern astronomy, when we peered closely into Venus using our telescope, we found that it is a hellish place, and it is even hotter than Mercury, and no creature can live on Venus at all. So it is the exact opposite of beauty. So Venus was named after the Roman goddess of beauty. The Earth's name is actually not derived from Greek mythology. It is the only major planet whose name is derived from actually Norse mythology, Germanic mythology. The Old English word, I don't know how to pronounce this, but it is derived from Norse mythology. Earth is the only planet. If it had been derived from Greek or Latin, it would have been called Terra. Mars is derived from the name of the Roman god of war, and the Greek equivalent is Ares. So if you have heard about martial arts, so martial is derived from the name of Mars, because Mars is related to war and fighting. That's why we call it martial arts, the arts of Mars. Jupiter is named appropriately, actually, because Jupiter is the biggest planet, and Jupiter is named after Zeus himself. So Zeus, we call the king of gods Zeus in Greek mythology, and we call him Jupiter in Roman mythology. So the biggest planet is Zeus or Jupiter. Next we have Saturn. Saturn is named after the Greek god of the Roman god of time. In Greece, it is called Kronos, and Kronos is actually the father of Zeus. And after, so you know that Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, they are all brothers. They were born at the same time. And after they were born, Kronos actually tried to eat his own babies. But then their mother saved him from, no, actually, he did manage to eat them, but Zeus escaped and slew Kronos and saved his brothers. So Saturn is named after this character, Kronos, the god of time. Uranus is named after the father of the sky. So I told you about Gaia, right? Gaia was the mother goddess, the goddess of the earth, goddess of all living beings. And mother, consider when we use the phrase Mother Earth, we are referring to Gaia. Similarly, the sky has, in all ancient mythologies, for some reason, the earth has always been associated with femininity, and the sky has always been associated with the masculine. So these were the original gods, Mother Earth and the sky god Uranus above, and whose union resulted in all of the other gods and all of the titans as well. And finally, Neptune is the name for Poseidon, the Roman name for Poseidon, because it is a kind of bluish planet, so it has associations with water, so they named it Neptune. So Neptune and Uranus weren't named by the ancient Greeks, we named them that. And Pluto also has an interesting history. Pluto was actually, when they discovered Pluto, I guess NASA sent out an appeal to the general public to help them name this new planet. And interestingly, there was a little girl, only about 10 or 12 years old. And she suggested, in a letter to NASA, she suggested that this planet should be named Pluto. And they accepted her suggestion and they named it Pluto. The moons. So our moon is named after Luna, the Roman goddess of the moon, Greek equivalent Selene. And Mars only has two moons, Phobos and Deimos. So Phobos was the Greek god of fear and panic, son of Ares, and Deimos was the Greek god of terror and dread, son of Ares. So since Mars is also Ares, right? Ares and Mars, they are the gods of war. So astronomers, so these names actually, all of these names, Io, Europa, and the moons, they weren't named by the Greeks. The Greeks didn't know that planets have moons. They only knew about our own moon. So all of these were later named by modern astronomers. And modern astronomers, they knew about the properties of these objects, so they named all of these very appropriately. So in Greek mythology, Phobos and Deimos, both of them are sons of Mars. So that is why astronomers named the moons of Mars after the sons of Mars in Greek mythology, Phobos and Deimos. Similarly, Jupiter's major moons, I will only talk about the 4 major moons of Jupiter. They are also named after characters that have a relation with Zeus or Jupiter. For example, Ganymede. So Ganymede was a very beautiful boy who Zeus actually kidnapped, and he took him to the realm of the gods to serve as a waiter or a cup bearer for the gods to bring them drinks. So that is why the Ganymede is also the biggest moon of Jupiter that revolves around Jupiter. So it's appropriate, if you think about it, that in Greek mythology, Ganymede was serving drinks to the gods, especially to Zeus, and in actuality as well, Ganymede is revolving around the planet Jupiter. Similarly, these Io, Europa, etc., they are also related to Zeus in a special way. So Europa was actually a princess who was actually abducted by Zeus. So Zeus has lots and lots of these crazy stories. So he also fell in love with this princess Europa, and he abducted her, and then he took her to a new land, and he told her that wherever, so the farthest you can see, that is your territory. And that territory that he showed Europa, that is the area we now call Europe. So that is how the name of Europe came from Greek mythology, because that was north of Greece. These are some of the actual pictures of these moons, Europa and Ganymede and our moon also. These are some other moons. I won't go through all of these because there are a lot, but you can see, interestingly, Uranus's major moons, they are named after characters from Shakespeare's plays. So you may have, for example, I have read Midsummer Night's Dream. So there are characters in there, Titania and Oberon. And if you have read the others, you will recognize these names. So in honor of Shakespeare, they named most of the major moons of Uranus after characters from Shakespeare's plays, Miranda, Ariel, etc. Saturn's moons, on the other hand, they are named after gods. Since Saturn himself is a Titan, so Saturn was a Titan actually in Greek mythology. Kronos was a Titan, and his sons were actually what we call gods. So the major moons of Saturn are also named after various Titans. So for example, Mimas and Enceladus, giant defeated by Athena in the Gigantomachy. So what was this Gigantomachy? So Gigantomachy was actually an attempt by all of the giants and the Titans to take over the rulership of the cosmos. They tried to overthrow the gods basically, and the gods defeated the Titans, and they locked all of the Titans away in Tartarus, deep underground. So if you have played some games related to mythology like God of War, that is a very famous game in PlayStation and Xbox, that also depicts that story. And you can see it in the movies as well, like I think in the second one, Wrath of the Titans. In Wrath of the Titans, you should see these movies actually. These are very famous movies. Clash of the Titans first. Clash of the Titans shows the heroic feats of Perseus, and they depict how he kills Medusa and how he slays the monster, he saves Andromeda, all of those things. And the second part of the movie, Clash of the Titans, that actually shows the Titans emerging from the deep underground where they were captured. And Kronos also makes an appearance in Clash of the Titans, the father of Zeus, etc. Okay. The moon Titan is just named after Titans generally, and all others are Titans. These are the actual pictures of some of these moons. Titan is the biggest, appropriately named. Now let's go into some interesting tidbits from modern astronomy and space missions. So Apollo program. Apollo is another very, very famous god of Greek mythology. The god of light, god of wisdom. So the Greeks believed that, so the Greeks saw that the sun was constantly revolving around the earth. How was the sun revolving? So the Greeks believed that actually the sun was being carried by Apollo on the back of his chariot every day. Apollo was riding around the earth and taking the sun with him, and that is how all of us received nourishment. Apollo was extremely, extremely important god, very important. Whenever anyone, and Apollo was also a very kind and just god. So people used to ask for his help a lot. So the first moon missions, the whole program was named after Apollo. And appropriately, now the continuation of the moon missions that NASA is undertaking now, and it has already selected a team of astronomers, including the first female astronauts to go to the moon. They named it after Artemis, the second one. And in Greek mythology, Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo. So as a continuation of Apollo, they named it Artemis. Artemis is the goddess of hunting that I told you about earlier in relation to Orion. Osiris. So Osiris is named after the famous Egyptian god Osiris. So Osiris is a very famous god in Egyptian mythology. So when in Egyptian mythology, when you die, after you die, you are taken to the underworld, and there you meet Osiris. So Osiris is standing there, and he has a scale. He pulls out your heart and he puts it on one side of the scale, and on the other side of a scale there is a very, very light feather. If you have done bad deeds in your life, the scale will tilt, the feather will move upwards. But if you have a pure heart, you haven't done any bad deeds, you have done good deeds your whole life, then your heart will be as light as a feather, and the feather will not come up, and only those people will be allowed to move into heaven, and all the others will be condemned to hell. So Osiris is the one making those decisions when you die. So very, very important god in Egyptian mythology. For in European Space Agency, they named one of their missions Hera. Hera, the one who was constantly after Hercules, trying to kill him, the wife of Zeus, who was extremely jealous of Zeus's promiscuous behavior. Rosetta is named after it's not a character, it's named after the Rosetta Stone. It is an object which they found in ruins from modern Egypt, which allowed archaeologists to decipher the hieroglyphics. So I don't know. So I think there were about 3 languages written on, and they found multiple Rosetta Stones, not just one, in different parts of Egypt. So the Rosetta Stone was something, it was like a Google Translate for the ancient Egyptians. So the ancient Egyptians, they had a very vast civilization. They had influences coming. They had lots of a big Greek population in the ancient Egyptian empire. There were the native Egyptians as well. There were other people as well. So to help everyone understand, they made a kind of a translation manual that allowed each of these 3 major languages to be translated into the other. And they had written the same passage in all 3 columns in all 3 different languages that would allow everyone to decipher. So luckily, archaeologists got their hands on these Rosetta Stones, which allowed them to decipher the hieroglyphics, which previously were completely gibberish to archaeologists, because most of them are just pictures. It was the Rosetta Stone that allowed us to understand what the Egyptians were doing. Further, if you look at the missions sent by the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, they named one of their probes Chandrayaan, which they were sent to the moon, Chandrayaan 1, 2, 3. And this word actually means mooncraft in Sanskrit, invoking Chandra Deva, the Hindu lunar deity. So in their own missions, instead of using the names from other cultures, they are using their own terminology to promote their own culture, which is good. Another, I think, solar observation mission that they sent, Aditya L1. This is named after the Hindu sun god Aditya, obviously because they are sending it to study the sun. That's why they named it after the sun god in Hindu mythology. So JAXA is Japan Space Agency. They named one of their this is, I guess, a space probe for measuring something. They named it after the peregrine falcon. I think the peregrine falcon is actually the fastest bird recorded. Its maximum speed is 200 miles per hour or 320 kilometers per hour. It's the fastest bird. So I guess Hayabusa is the Japanese name for the peregrine falcon. And finally, China's Chang'e program, that the space probe that they sent to the far side of the moon, they named it after their own moon goddess Chang'e. So everyone is using their own names, right? Artemis, Apollo, and whatever their heritage is. I hope that one day we are also able to get our space agency functional, up and running, and we also I hope we are able to send space missions like this to Moon and Mars and the Sun, and then we will appropriately also name it after our own culture, names from our own culture. You can see this is a logo of the Artemis space program depicting Artemis over here, shooting her arrows because she was the goddess of hunting and wildlife. Now let's discuss the days of the week. I think this is very, very interesting because we hear these names literally every single day: Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Where did these names come from? So once upon a time, I decided to probe into this, and I was pleasantly surprised that all of these are named after various kinds of gods, and some of them are extremely obvious. Sunday is just the day of the sun. So the when these names were being said, so actually the sun was the most important object, and sun and the moon. So they named one of the days after the sun. In Norse language, they called the sun god Sana. So Suna or Sana. So that's how we got this name. Then Monday comes from moon, day of the moon, and actually month, the word month also is derived from the word moon, because a month, so the duration of a month is almost exactly the same as the lunar cycle, 28 days, 29 days. So that's why they named this period of time 28 to 30 days after the moon, and it, after some reiterations, it became month, but it's derived from the word moon. Then Tuesday. So most of these are except Sunday, Monday, and Saturday. The others are named after Norse mythology, characters from Norse mythology, because the English language directly inherits mostly from the Germanic tradition and the Norse tradition. That's why there are lots of influences in English of the old Germanic languages and Norse languages. So there was a god named Tiv in the Norse pantheon, or Tyr, and he was the god of war and justice, the equivalent of Mars and Ares. So they could have, and in French actually, Tuesday is called Mardi. So the French actually, they have used the Roman word for the god of war Mars, and they named Mardi. Tuesday is called Mardi, but in English we call it Tuesday. We use the Norse god, but it's the same kind of god of war. Wednesday is named after Woden, and its equivalent is Mercury, and in French they call it Mercredi. So the French have retained most of the Roman names, but the English language, it has substituted some from the Germanic tradition as well. So we call it Wednesday because it comes from Woden. And Woden is the same as Odin, by the way. If you know of Odin, the famous god, the father of Thor and Loki in Norse mythology. Thursday is named after Thor. If you have watched the Marvel movies, you will know about Thor, one of the most famous in the Norse pantheon, the god of thunder, the son of Odin. And his equivalent is Jupiter or Zeus, the god of sky and thunder. And Friday is named after the goddess of beauty and love in the Norse tradition, and its equivalent is Venus, or Venus in Roman, and in the Greek tradition, Aphrodite. Yes. And Saturday obviously comes from Saturn, day of Saturn. So now you know how all of these days were named. Sunday after the sun, Monday after moon, Tuesday after the god of war. And if you search out the names of the days of the week in French, then this will make more sense. Tuesday is after the god of war, Wednesday after the Mercury, and Thursday after Thor or Zeus. So Thursday is the day of Zeus, important day. Friday is the day of love and beauty. So you can associate it with these gods. And Saturday is the day of Saturn. Here they are depicted. And the months of the year also have an interesting history. So this is, I guess, the final thing. So January is named after the Roman god called Janus. So Janus was a two-faced god, and he is associated with beginnings, endings, transitions. Well, January is the first month of the year. Obviously, it is a transition period into a new year. And actually, January, February were added later as months to the Roman list, because previously the Romans used to use the lunar calendar, which only had 10 months. That's why the names September, October, November, December don't make much sense. I will tell you why. February comes from Februa, an ancient Roman purification festival honoring the god Februs. March comes from Mars. This is clear. Roman god of war. He makes a constant appearance. We have a planet named after him. In French, at least, we have a day named after him, and we have a month named after him, Mars. April is derived from a Latin word, not a character, but a word which means to open. It is a verb, and it symbolizes spring, because things start to blossom and flower buds start to open in April, and things come to life. And it is said that April is also the word April associated with Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love and beauty. The names are similar. May is named after Maya, a Roman earth goddess of spring and fertility. June is named after Juno, the Roman goddess of marriage and queen of the gods. July and August, these were actually named after two Roman emperors. So I told you in the beginning that some of the names of the month, they come from gods. Some are named after kings, and some are numerical. So June and July, they are July and August, they are named after. July is named after the the most famous Roman emperor Julius Caesar, and August is named after the emperor Augustus Caesar. September, actually, so you can recognize if you look closely that sept means 7, and oct means 8, no means 9, and des, just like we say decillion, nonillion, octillion. So sept is associated with 7, oct is 8, Nov is 9, and des is 10. But September is not the 7th month of the year. October is not the 8th month of the year. These names are like 2 units displaced. So why is that? So just as I told you, originally there were only 10 months, and the month for the year for the Romans, it used to start with March. So March was the first month of the year for the Romans originally. But then since the lunar calendar is not that accurate, they decided to switch to a solar calendar, and then they added 2 months in the beginning, January, February. But they retained the names September, October, November, December. So that's why numerically these names don't make sense. So that is all. If you have any questions, you can ask.
Thank you for the interesting talk. I was just wondering, when you mentioned the story related to Prometheus, that the eagle would eat its spleen, liver, and then the next day the liver would regenerate. So did the Greek by any chance knew medical science, or is this just a very lucky coincidence?
I think it's so can the liver regenerate that quickly?
Yes, not in a day, but they suppose that it would.
I don't know.
The eagle, there were lots of things that wouldn't happen that happened in their stories.
Exactly.
So but then there is this correlation. So that sounded interesting.
Might be the case that they knew that the liver has these regenerative capabilities. That's why they included it in the story. But it could have been just a lucky guess, I think.
Could be a
Who knows? Could be a coincidence.
So this is worth research, maybe. Finding out.
Perhaps there has been research done on this. I don't know. Yeah.
And another question, if Suparco, Pakistan explores this space and gets to name something, what would you suggest? What letter are you going to write, Suparco?
Let's see. क्या चांद पे अगर जाएंगे तो हम क्या उसको कहेंगे, मुझे इतने अच्छे आइडियाज़ नहीं हैं. मुझे लगता है कि हमें ना जो अपनी ज़बान है ना, अपने जो कल्चर है ना, बजाय कि अरबी से हम फ़ौरन से एक लफ्ज़ उठा लें और वो डाल दें वहाँ पे. हमारा कोई अरेबिक कल्चर हमारा नहीं है. हमारा वी हैव आवर ओन कल्चर ना, गोइंग बैक टू द इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन. इंडिजिनस कल्चर है हमारा, जिसके अंदर हमारी अपनी ज़बान है, उर्दू, पर्शियन उसके अंदर इन्फ्लुएंसेस हैं, और लेकिन संस्कृत के भी उसके अंदर इन्फ्लुएंसेस हैं, हिंदी से बड़ी मिलती जुलती है. तो हमें ना अपने, आई गेस कि हमें अपने जो लोकल हीरोज़ हैं और लोकल लेजेंड्स हैं वहाँ से हमें डिराइव करने चाहिए नेम्स, बजाय इसके कि हम चले जाएंगे तुर्कों के पास और अरबियों के पास और वहाँ से अपना मिशंस को नाम दें. दैट वुड बी माई अप्रोच.
Thank you so much, sir. Could you please explain a little bit more about history of Scorpio?
अच्छा, तो Scorpio. So I told you about the story of Orion the hunter, right? Orion the hunter. So I told you that Orion was actually a very, very famous hunter in Greek myth. But one day he became overconfident in his abilities and he started boasting about the fact that he could kill any and all living creatures on earth if he wanted to. To which Gaia, the mother goddess, the mother of all living beings and the mother of the earth, took offense, obviously, because he was talking about her children. So to teach him a lesson, she sent a giant scorpion his way to kill Orion, because Orion had made a big offense. And the scorpion succeeded in killing Orion. So to commemorate the folly of Orion, I guess they transferred him to the heavens, the gods, and they also transferred the scorpion to the heavens. So that's where the Scorpio. So you must be a Scorpio if you are asking this question. Are you? You can ask about your own star signs if you want. Even though astrology is a pseudoscience, but still we can go into the history. We can go into the history. If I don't know about every single one, but you can share yours. What is your star sign?
I'd like to ask another question.
अच्छा, मैम को इंटरेस्ट नहीं है.
I know plenty about astrology, and but why do we call it a pseudoscience if there's no science involved?
वो कहते हैं ना कि साइंटिफिक है, तो इसलिए हम कहते हैं कि स्यूडो साइंस है, असल में साइंस नहीं है. टू काउंटर देम ना, तो वो कहते हैं कि हम साइंटिफिक बात कर रहे हैं और हम बिल्कुल वेरीफाइबल चीज़ है हमारे. हम कहते हैं नहीं, स्यूडो साइंस, इट्स नॉट एन फेक साइंस. दैट्स व्हाई.
I mean, does it even deserve the label of science, even though it's pseudo?
But सही है, but it's important to distinguish it from real science ना. If someone is claiming that their theory is scientific, even though it's not, we have to label it in such a way that it like makes a distinction clear that it's pseudoscience, not real science. Same applies to Freud's psychology. People think that it's very scientific and very empirical. It's not.
Yes, it's not.
It's not. So that's why.
That could be maybe better labeled as pseudoscience compared to astrology, maybe. Just my opinion. And then in your talk, I felt that you were more, what would I call it, lenient towards mythology, even though it's crazier than astronomy. Astrology, sorry. You were not gentle with astrology, but you were very gentle and accepting of mythology.
नहीं, तो mythology, देखें, mythology को कोई literally तो नहीं ले रहा ना, कोई इसको सच तो नहीं मान रहा. अगर कोई इसको सच मान के, people used to, but not anymore. But if someone is out there who is taking mythology literally and he is converting it into a business, for example, and he is using it to make predictions or something, then I will oppose him, obviously. But if we are just treating it like stories from which we can like derive some lessons, or just for the fun of it, we are reading these stories, then there is no harm. And I find these extremely interesting. So much fun.
Entertaining.
Very entertaining.
So this was the Greeks' Netflix.
Yeah, this daily night show in the sky. Yes, exactly.
Yes. And the story
you also, from these myths, you also learn a lot about the Greeks themselves, how what their thinking and mindset
what they
was,
valued, and
what they valued exactly, how they viewed their place in the universe, and so on. So I think it's a very, very important, like not just a curiosity, but very important historical artifact.
Exactly,
actually,
a window into their thinking.
Exactly, and I think one of the best ways to understand any ancient culture of whose descendants we no longer have access to, should look into their stories. We should read their stories. Their stories reflect a lot about what their philosophy of life was. And different cultures have very different stories. Some emphasize war and conquest. Some emphasize love and harmony more. And that is reflected in their stories.
True.
Online है कोई? Online check करो. No. Finish? Okay.